As kids, we were taught that daydreaming was a waste of time. Some of us had our imaginations stifled, told to grow up, sit still, stay in line. But decades later, we're spinning the block on the very thing they tried to steal from us because Black imagination is the blueprint. Welcome to Futures in Black. I'm your host, Kasheia, AI strategist, educator, and longtime lover of science, technology, and sci-fi. This show isn't just about reclaiming our place in the future. It's about reprogramming what the future even is when Black imagination leads. Because we're not just participants in someone else's story, we're architects of whole new worlds. And that work starts right now. How many of you had an imaginary friend when you were younger? I definitely did. Mine had a name, a look, even specific outfits that she would wear. And believe me, she definitely put that shit on. We had entire conversations that felt vivid and as real as any interaction in my life today. She didn't exist in the real world, but the feelings, the dialogue, the relationship, that was all very real to me. And it was all meaningful. And I know it wasn't just me. Many of us as kids created elaborate dream worlds. We saw monsters and shadows, kingdoms and trees, portals and puddles. I remember when one of my play cousins was my neighbor, and we would pretend that the giant bush in his yard was the home base for our sting operation or whatever we imagined for the day. And we used the leaves as like a high-tech dashboard. And I mean, we were all in, and you really couldn't tell us nothing. Okay. We were definitely like in a sting operation doing some important shit. Okay. But we didn't just play, we imagined. And in that imagining, we rehearsed what was possible, or even things that we were told that were impossible. Maybe you also daydreamed about who you might be when you grew up. Maybe an astronaut, maybe a singer, a scientist. Maybe you imagined flying or traveling through time. And maybe, just maybe, you actually became something you once dreamed of. And if you did, pause and just honor how powerful that is. For many of us as children, imagination wasn't just encouraged, it was effortless. Play was important work in imagination, but somewhere along the way, we were told to stop, to grow up, to get realistic. Daydreaming became a distraction. Creativity became elective, and we were fed someone else's idealism instead. Systems designed to bring their dreams into fruition, not ours. The tragedy is that Black imagination has always been powerful, but it's also always been under siege because, according to thinkers like Walida Imarisha and Tricia Hersey, oppressive systems, whether colonial, educational, or algorithmic, have long recognized imagination as a threat. So they try to control it. They steal what Hersey calls our dream space, filling our time with grind culture, over surveillance, and a pressure to constantly perform. But the actual truth is that Black imagination has always been one of our greatest survival technologies. From the spirituals sung by enslaved Africans that encoded escape routes, to the prophetic dreaming of Harriet Tubman, to the cosmic jazz of Sun Ra, we have always used our creative minds to map our way out of the impossible. Imagination isn't a luxury for us, it's how we've survived, it's how we've resisted. From griots preserving our histories, to spirituals mapping our escapes, to graffiti tagging our presence into a society that tries to erase us, our creativity has always carried political and emotional weight. It's always been a place to process grief, to rehearse joy, to practice liberation. That's not coincidence, that's our legacy. Robin D.G. Kelly calls this the Black radical imagination. It's the ability to conjure freedom in the midst of confinement, to visualize joy while navigating violence, to see beyond what is and name what could be. This is the kind of vision that fuels abolitionist movements, Black theology, and Afrofuturist art. It's what Ruha Benjamin describes as critical infrastructure, not roads or data centers, but our very ability to imagine otherwise. And in recent years, we've seen a beautiful resurgence of this truth. From mindfulness practices to manifestation techniques, more and more people are returning to imagination, not just as a means of escapism, but as medicine. Creative visualization, vision boards, even therapy modalities like inner child work. These are all ways we as adults are remembering what kids already knew. Imagination is a way forward. So if you found yourself drawn back to that childlike wonder, if you've caught yourself staring out of a window and seeing not what is, but what could be, don't dismiss that. It's not distraction, it's a download. Today, we're going deep into dreaming, not just as indulgence, but more as a practice in future building. We're discussing why Black imagination is not an option. It's essential, not merely creative, but critically strategic, not abstract, but ancestral technology and practice. Because the futures we want can't be built without a vision. And that vision starts in our minds. Let's reclaim it. Let's expand it. Let's start dreaming out loud. So let's define the stakes more clearly. In a Black futurist context, imagination isn't just artistic or whimsical, it's foundational. It's not something we engage in when we have extra time. It's something we've always had to do in order to just survive. Because for Black people, dreaming is not a luxury, it's a technology. It's the basis of our liberated freedom. Historically, oppressive systems have always recognized the power of Black creativity and actively worked to suppress it. Colonial regimes didn't just ban language. You see, they banned drumming, they banned dance, spiritual practice, and literacy. Each of those things represent more than culture. They were conduits of memory. They were symbols of resistance and blueprints for our survival. They were the very things that made us human, and they were deemed dangerous because they sparked connections. They transmitted knowledge. They reminded us we were something beyond their property. You want to make white folks uneasy? Organize and gather a group of black folks. And today, those same dynamics persist in modern forms: over policing, standardized education that rewards rote memorization over critical thinking, and capitalist grind culture that conditions us to equate our worth with the level of productivity that we provide. These systems constrain Black imaginative space, our dream space, as Trisha Hersey of the NAP Ministry calls it. And when we're exhausted, overworked, and hyper monitored, we're robbed of that internal room required to dream freely. And that is not by accident. Walida Imarisha calls this suppression the colonization of the imagination. She says it's one of the most insidious forms of oppression because it occurs internally. It limits not just what we can do, but what we can even envision doing. If you can't imagine an alternative to what is, you're more likely to accept what is, even if it's harmful, even if it's unjust. And that's exactly the point. Sun Ra once said, "The impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change." That's the crux of imaginative resistance. It isn't about fantasy. It's about refusing to accept the reality that stagnated under the weight of the possible. Black imagination dares to choose the impossible, and that's why it's so powerful. Adrienne Marie Brown puts it another way: all organizing is science fiction. Consider what that means. Every movement that challenges the status quo, whether abolitionist organizing, civil rights, environmental justice, or even gender equality, began as someone's what if. It began as imagination, as refusal, as the ability to say, I really don't care if it don't exist yet. I can already see it anyway. And that kind of vision is not passive, it's radical. It's a blueprint for systems that don't yet exist. It's a tool for community planning, for institutional redesign, for policy transformation. Imagination, then, is not just about possibility, it's about direction. It's how marginalized communities rehearse freedom, how we encode resistance. It's the framework through which we organize and design new realities. Afrofuturism at its core takes this concept and runs with it. It expands the definition of technology far beyond hardware and software. Because for centuries, Black people have built and maintained complex, adaptive systems using tools not recognized by the West as tech. Oral history, spiritual practice, folk wisdom, music, and ritual. These are our technologies, and they've sustained us across time zones, under oppression and through migration. Take the work of Tech Afrique. They're an Afrofuturist art collective. They describe music and sound as transformative tools, like portals into liberated futures. And they use traditional African drumming alongside synthesizers and electronic composition to create what they call sonic portals. These are spaces that don't just express Black futurity, but embody it. This isn't just art for art's sake. It's spiritual design. It's time travel. It's memory re engineering in real time. Similarly, scholar Ruha Benjamin argues that imagination itself is critical infrastructure. So, in her latest work, Imagination, a Manifesto, she describes imagination as a field of struggle, a place where power is contested and futures are negotiated. She writes that society often pours endless resources into building robots and refining AI, but balks at the idea of investing in racial equity or community well being. Her question is hauntingly simple. Why is it easier for us to imagine machines that can think than a society where Black people are free? Her critique is razor sharp. And honestly, she's right. When our collective imaginations shrink under the weight of systemic inequality, we lose the very thing that could liberate us. Afrofuturists answer this challenge head on. They insist that cultural memory, emotional resilience, and creativity are not decorative. They are central operating systems for any just future. So think about that. If you view storytelling, spirituals, and cultural rituals as code, then Black culture contains encrypted survival instructions, wisdom passed down in formats designed to endure trauma and censorship. Folk tales then weren't just entertainment, they carried moral frameworks, survival cues, and intergenerational warnings. Spirituals weren't just songs, they were maps. They told us where to go and when to run. They synced our heartbeats with one another. They built solidarity. And in practical terms, this means that every folktale, every dance, every lullaby, every funeral, every cookout, every sermon, every moment of Black laughter or collective grieving carries embodied information. These are not abstract expressions. They are data sets. They're survival algorithms. They encode strategy, identity, and direction. To the untrained eye, these rituals might seem like nostalgia or tradition. But for us, for Black people, they are a mode of construction. They are how we've carried ourselves through worlds that wanted to crush us. They're the reason we're still here. And these technologies are not static, they evolve, they change with the times. Think of how Black Twitter has functioned before it became the wasteland that X is. But it was a digital oral tradition, it was an archive, a protest space, and a cultural production engine all in one. Think of how memes and language and music circulate through our communities online, faster than any mainstream media source can capture. That is also imagination in motion, and it is strategic. It's no wonder that oppressive systems continue to target these technologies. Surveillance, censorship, educational defunding, and cultural appropriation are all tactics to either silence or extract from our frameworks of imagination. Whether it's banning books or building algorithms that reinforce bias, the aim is the same: restrict what we can dream, control what we can build. But the good news is we're already doing that work. From the speculative fiction, from Octavia's Brood to abolitionist visioning workshops, From community design labs to healing circles, Black people are not just dreaming, we are designing, we are prototyping. We're building open source futures that make room for rest, for freedom, for abundance. We're remembering that imagination is not just an idea, it's a tool, one as essential as any blueprint or any budget. So when we say the future is Black, we are not just talking aesthetics, we're talking systems. We're talking about soul level architecture. We're talking about dreaming as planning, memory as data, and joy as foundational, and rest as resistance. This is the work. This is the framework, the technology. And if we want to build something real, something better, we have to start by freeing our minds from the systems that tell us what's realistic. Because the most radical thing we can do right now isn't just resist, it's imagine. We have to fill that void. Take artificial intelligence. It's a field that is obviously rapidly transforming before our eyes. It's transforming our world. Current AI technologies often replicate systemic biases because they're trained on historically biased data. If you ask any image generating AI platform for simply a beautiful woman, for example, or a businessman, for another example, the images will almost always default to a white person. Beyond that, last episode we learned about Joy Buolamwini, who discovered and she called out the failure of facial recognition technology to even know what a blackface was. When the minds behind AI models like Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT dream of AI superintelligence, Black people, our nuances, our breadth, our ingenuity is not even so much as an afterthought. But what if we intentionally infused AI with Black imagination? Imagine AI systems trained on liberation texts, protest chants, Black literature, and community driven values. Could technology that is developed with a vision rooted in empathy rather than mere efficiency fundamentally change our world? Of course it would. Envision city planning guided by exercises and creative visualization rather than profit motives. Consider education systems designed around creativity and critical thinking rather than standardized tests. What if public safety meant community care instead of surveillance, over policing? No more preschool to prison pipelines. No prison industrial complex where Black pain and Black bodies are commodified and capitalized on. No standardized testing, no food islands and oppressive methods of governance, no big pharma. Can you imagine that future? Right now, the future is actively being shaped by minds with limited visions or harmful agendas. Our task is very clear. Expand the imaginative frameworks that guide technology, governance, and society at large. Organizations have started incorporating freedom dreaming sessions into strategic planning. They are recognizing that brainstorming and storytelling are just as critical to innovation as technical processes. And this isn't fantasy. It's a practical methodology for creating humane, equitable, and inclusive futures. Futures that are constructed around collectivism and holistic frameworks that are grounded in real science and rooted in wisdom. Imagine a future where every Black child is given dream tech, a toolkit, not just pens and tablets, but a curated blend of coding languages, storytelling practices, and ancestral wisdom encoded into their everyday learning. A toolkit that treats imagination not as a break from reality, but as a means of designing it. What kind of future becomes possible when Black children aren't just allowed to dream, but are equipped to do it? When they're given the structure, the language, and the resources to bring those wild, radiant visions into form. What happens when we treat imagination the same way we treat math or science, as a foundational literacy? Well, what happens is we stop building children to serve systems, and we start building systems around the imaginations of children. Picture an educational system that prioritizes imagination as essential, not extracurricular or a distraction, where gifted doesn't mean more compliant or faster at memorizing, but more curious, more divergent, more radical in thought. It could be a place where students design worlds, not work on worksheets for 8 hours a day, where the question isn't what job do you want to do when you grow up, but what kind of future do you want to build, and then giving them the tools to build it. Now imagine this. Your smartphone is embedded with a griot's wisdom. Not just algorithms guessing what you want to buy next, but an AI storyteller guiding your daily decisions with generational insights, drawing from oral traditions, liberation philosophy, and collective memory. This isn't just your Siri with a new voice. It's ancestral technology reimagined for the future. Or what if we had Black created social platforms designed for collective dreaming, not for distraction, not for surveillance, but for syncing ideas, healing together, planning together, sharing speculative designs for liberated housing, education, justice. Imagine logging into a digital space that says, what dream do you need help building today? When our tech isn't built to monetize our attention, but to magnify our intentions, the world opens up in unimaginable ways. And that kind of deep mental and spiritual connection, that connection between people, between ideas and generations, it would be literally transformative. We would shift from AI to what we might call higher self-intelligence. Think of new tech systems that don't just learn from us, but call us higher, remind us of who we are, make us braver. Visualize urban environments that are intentionally designed as cultural and community portals. These could be spaces where technology, wellness, and imagination are not separate disciplines, but part of daily life. Public parks with solar-powered storytelling stations. Think healing clinics designed around ancestral medicine and biometric data. VR headsets that offer not just entertainment, but guided journeys through liberation history, future simulations, and spiritual grounding. Cities that are planned not by investors, but by poets and elders. And what I'm talking about isn't just escapism. It isn't just pie in the sky thought. This is practical hacking of the future. This is infrastructure born from real vision. It's systems engineering with a soul. Because the truth is that careers, capitalism, the sanitized dream of success that we've been sold, it's all a myth anyway. Manufactured myths by billionaires whose dreams are actually nightmares, even for themselves. Their fantasies are filled with control, extraction, isolation, and we've been groomed to chase those fantasies like their salvation. But their pathways lead to boxes, cubicles, prisons, siloed lives, dreams that were never really ours. And Black imagination has always refused boxes. Our minds operate in constellations, in rhythm, in remix. The depth of our creative field is so vast, it's so intricate, it's so expansive that the boxes that they give us could never, ever contain it. So ask yourself, if we had full access to the infinite pool of Black thought and creativity, unbothered, unburdened, unbought, what would we build? Because we've inherited more than trauma. We've inherited blueprints. The griots weren't just storytellers, they were record keepers, data scientists, world architects. The songs sung in the cotton fields, those were code, survival algorithms. The ring shouts, the sermons, the hip hop ciphers, they weren't just expression, they were strategy. But we've internalized assimilation so deeply that we forget. We forget we are not made for these systems. These systems were made to contain us. The severance that occurred when our African ancestors were taken to these foreign lands was not just physical, it was epistemic. It was an attack on knowing, on dreaming, on memory, and it was intentional. But reclaiming our imaginative power reconnects us to ancestral technologies of resilience, brilliance, and design. Imagination is not just hope, it's structure, it's scaffolding for futures that don't yet exist. And when we dream together across space, across time, across modalities, we are not escaping, we're building. We're crafting timelines that aren't defined by suffering, but by possibility. We're choosing futures that are woven with wisdom and adorned in unbothered vision and rooted in joy that doesn't have to be earned. Because what's coming next is up to us. Let's make it beautiful. Let's make it ours. I talked earlier about Trisha Hersey, who's the founder of the Nap Ministry. And she presents rest as, not laziness, not as luxury, but as a revolution. In a world that weaponizes exhaustion, particularly against Black people, rest becomes resistance. Hersey challenges the core values of capitalist culture: productivity, efficiency, and grind, and reclaiming our rest as reclaiming our humanity. And in doing so, we reclaim our imagination, our spiritual balance, and our capacity to create something radically different. Her work isn't theoretical, it's embodied. Hersey's philosophy reframes rest as strategic self preservation, not simply for the sake of recovery, but for the sake of reimagining. Because without time to reflect, without time to even breathe or to even dream, the future becomes a rerun of the past. Reclaiming rest disrupts the logic of white supremacy and capitalism, which equate our worth to how much we can produce, how quickly we can hustle, how silently we can suffer. Through public rest activations, curated nap sanctuaries, and online ministry that has gained hundreds of thousands of followers, Hersey makes a bold political statement. Black people are not machines, and we refuse to be treated as such. Imagine reclaiming rest and imagination as intentional acts of resistance, as liberation tools, not just passive responses, but active disruptions of systems built on exhaustion and exploitation. That's what Hersey offers us. She connects the historical violence of slavery, where rest was systemically denied, with the burnout, the sleep disorders, and the chronic stress plaguing Black communities today. This isn't about being tired, it's about being targeted. She names this phenomenon dream space thefts. And it highlights how oppression doesn't just steal our time or steal our money, it steals the mental and spiritual space that we need to dream. Because if we can't dream, we can't design. And if we can't imagine otherwise, we're trapped in what currently is. Think about that. Do you remember maybe being scolded for daydreaming in a class? That wasn't just about paying attention. That was part of the conditioning. It was part of the suppression. Daydreaming is where vision lives. It's where new ideas are seeded. Hersey invites us to reclaim that lost dream time as sacred, as necessary, as something no system has the right to take from us. And this philosophy has rippled outward far beyond the realm of personal wellness. With activists and organizing spaces, it's become something of an organizing principle. Movements for Black liberation are beginning to embed rest into their very structures. You'll now find rest days built into multi-day direct actions, healing spaces at conferences, emotional support offerings for organizers and protesters. Why? Because burnout is real and liberation cannot be sustained on exhaustion. I can't tell you how many days I've come home from work just mentally and physically exhausted. And I don't do physical labor at work. And so much so that I don't even want to open my laptop again. I don't even want to think about my personal projects, things that I'm dreaming of, things that I'm trying to build, because the capitalist structure of society requires that I give the majority of my day to a job. And liberation cannot be sustained on tiredness. Hersey's work is rooted in the deep soil of African spiritual traditions, particularly Sabbath keeping, contemplation, and prayer. Her theology infused methodology doesn't separate body from spirit or even productivity from purpose. She asserts that rest isn't just repair, but that it's strategy, it's a portal, that it restores our ability to dream vividly, imagine freely, and strategically envision the structures we deserve. And that vision is essential because under racial capitalism, Black imagination has always been both exploited and dismissed. Historically, Black creativity has fueled industries. Think music, fashion, language, digital culture. But rarely have Black people been compensated or credited accordingly. Our innovations have built billion-dollar sectors, yet we are excluded from ownership. Our genius is extracted, it's repackaged and then resold as mainstream, very often without acknowledgement, without access, or any level of power. This is part of a larger pattern. Scholar Ruha Benjamin describes the rise of algorithmic bias and automated discrimination as the new Jim Code, a digital evolution of systemic injustice. These are not just glitches in AI, they are modern reinforcements of racial hierarchy. Technology is not neutral. It is created by people. It's trained on historical data, and it's implemented through systems that are already steeped in inequality. But within this deeply flawed architecture, Black imagination refuses to disappear. It re-emerges as strategy, as refusal, as blueprint. Rather than accept the narrow boundaries of extractive systems, Black creators and communities continue to dream outside of the margins. We're designing alternatives, co-op economies, mutual aid networks, digital safe spaces, cultural platforms that are rooted in equity and care. These are not future fantasies. These are present day prototypes of liberated, free systems. For example, we can take the rise of Black-led cooperatives that challenge traditional capitalist business models, or the community-driven design labs that explore Afrocentric approaches to urban planning, sustainable agriculture, or blockchain, or the Black science fiction collectives reimagining justice, time, and ancestry as design elements. This is about building futures that reflects our deepest truths, not adapting to an unjust future. It's about aligning our technologies with our values, not the other way around. Because the systems we live in were not built for us to thrive. Yet we're still here. We're still dreaming. We're still building. And that is no small thing. Our survival in the age of AI, automation, and digital surveillance doesn't depend on how well we can conform. It depends on how boldly we can dream, and then how intentionally we design from those dreams. Black imagination becomes more than just expression. It becomes a matrix of establishment. It becomes a living, breathing technology for world building. Rest and imagination aren't opposites of action. They are the action. They're what sustains us when the noise gets loud. They're what reminds us that we are more than labor, more than content, more than data. When we center our rest, we reclaim the sacred. When we prioritize imagination, we reclaim our agency. When we dream collectively, we reclaim the future. Let them call it whatever they want to call it. They can call it soft. They can misunderstand it and be passive about it. We know better. This is not softness. It's not weakness. It's strategy. It's not fantasy. This is our resistance. And this is how we win, not just by surviving systems, but by out dreaming them, by resting, imagining, and building the worlds we were told we didn't deserve. Because we do, and we always have. So, here are a few takeaways and a few things you may want to know or jot down from today's episode. The first is that imagination forms the blueprint for all transformative change. Every revolution, every innovation, every shift in human consciousness began first as a thought, an idea. It was an unformed spark in someone's mind. Before there were cities, there were visions of community. Before there were movements, there were quiet what ifs whispered among the brave. Before anything material was ever built, it had to be imagined first. And that's the power of vision. That's the architecture of dreaming. And when we talk about liberation, what we're talking about is building something that doesn't yet exist, which means imagination isn't optional, it is absolutely essential. Technology is moving fast. Automation is everywhere. We've got tools in our pockets that would look like pure magic to our ancestors. Instant translations, real-time satellite maps, artificially generated art, voice-activated homes. But when you strip away the spectacle, what's underneath, what remains? Much of it is designed to keep us locked into systems of consumption, distraction, and data extraction. These tools, no matter how advanced, aren't inherently liberatory. They reflect the values of those who designed them. And without intentional, visionary frameworks guiding their purpose, they often become mechanisms of control rather than catalysts for freedom. And Black imagination, it breaks that cycle. It's how we've always survived the impossible. It's how we've thrived in the cracks of systems meant to erase us. To imagine is to remember that another way is always possible. Dream, imagine, visualize, create. These aren't just feel-good practices, they're methodologies. They are design tools for building lives, communities, and technologies that serve us. So what can you do to exercise your imagination and take back your dream space? You can practice dream journaling, not just for like your personal goals, but for collective futures. What do you want your neighborhood to look like in 2040 if liberation is the norm? What do you see children learning? How are our elders cared for? What technologies do you imagine existing, and who owns them? You can support visionary creators and collectives like Afrotectopia. It's a platform that reimagines Black futures through interdisciplinary creativity. Or things like Wakanda Dream Lab, which blends storytelling, movement work, and speculative fiction into developing real-world solutions. Evaluate your own tech stack. Are the tools you use in alignment with your values? Are they helping you build something lasting or just keeping you busy? How are you using them? Try to use technology that supports community, rest, equity, and creativity. Dreaming isn't just a luxury. In fact, it isn't a luxury at all. It isn't a side activity. It is the foundation for all meaningful transformation, Before you build, you must envision. Before you organize, you must imagine. Before we change the world, we have to dream of one that's worth even living in. And the blueprint, it starts with you. The future won't be engineered solely by code. It won't be defined exclusively by think tanks, boardrooms, or government panels. The most liberating futures will be first imagined around kitchen tables, in community centers, at barbershops, in prayer circles, at cookouts, and in the spaces where Black voices have always gathered to speak truth, to process pain, and to dream beyond the moment. It's in these spaces, these often overlooked spaces, that radical imagination lives. Because before anything is built, it must be seen. And before it can be seen by the world, it must be allowed to bloom in the minds and in the mouths of those who dare to dream out loud. To imagine publicly is to assert your right into the future. To speak your vision is to carve out space for it in the now. And when Black people dream collectively, without apology or restraint, it sends ripples through the systems that were never meant to hold us. It disrupts, it reroutes, it redesigns. Dreaming, envisioning, and seeing beyond our current circumstances is more than hope. It's damn near a Black superpower. We've been practicing this forever, and our survival depends on it. But our thriving, that depends on how boldly we can share and shape those dreams together. So it's time to activate. It's time to unify our visions, and not into one monolithic future, but into a living constellation of Black possibility. What dreams are you carrying right now that could serve as blueprints for new realities? What have you imagined that others need to hear? What ifs have been whispering to you? Bring them, speak them, share them. You can visit futuresinblack.com/ask and drop your visions, drop your questions and your declarations. This is more than a feedback form. I want it to be like a digital altar. I want Futures in Black to be a growing archive of dreams that will help shape the direction of this movement. Dreaming out loud isn't just imagination, it is design. It is strategy. It's the first step that we take towards our own liberation. And your voice belongs in that blueprint. I will see you on the next episode of Futures in Black, where the visions are bold, the voices are Black, and the permission is not needed. Talk to you guys next time.